Okay, so we've been working on 1-point perspective drawings, and now we're going to jump into 2-point perspective drawings, but in a slightly different way. So instead of drawing a room or hallway or something like that, like what you did in the 1-point perspective assignment, I'm going to set up a still life and draw some blocks and boxes. So I'm actually going to jump right into doing this drawing as opposed to starting with some thumbnail sketches. But first I'm going to make a real loose border around my image. And as I do this, you can see that I'm just balancing or brushing the edge of the paper with my finger and just holding my pencil still, charcoal pencil. A little bit trickier on this side since it's bumpy because of that spiral there. But I do think it's important to always set up a border, even if you want to think of the outside edge of the picture plane or the outside edge of the paper as the edge of the picture plane. I think that this is really helpful to establish exactly what the picture plane is. It also helps to protect the drawing. So that's where I start with doing that border around it. Now I'm going to jump right into this with my reference off screen. I've got a still life set up, probably going to be working mostly from a photograph. But one of the things that I've got here, let's see, I've got a box that takes up about just a little over, just around half of the picture plane here. I'm gonna set that up there, that length. I think it's about twice as long as it is wide, so I'll set that up with the height here. All right, so I'm gonna kind of a wooden plywood, an old toolbox or kind of organizer. And let's see, I'm going to start with that. Then I know I've got a cigar box. It's going to be right around here to here. And another block up here. All right, so I'm going to start with these. I've got a little bit of a, not a horizon line exactly, but the back of a cardboard box back here. So what I did with this, you can set up your boxes however you want to do this, but what I did was I arranged all my boxes to have about the same setup, the same angles. That's what I want to say, same angles. So where before I had you guys identify exactly where your vanishing point was, and I bet, so this box that I've got is square to the picture plane, which means that it's parallel to the picture plane. I've got that bottom edge there, then my picture plane right there, so those are horizontal lines. And this would be evidence of 1-point perspective. I bet I could probably figure that out without a whole lot of work. Let me see. I bet I could. And I don't have to do that. Actually, I'm not going to have you guys figure out exactly what your vanishing points are for this, because I'm just going to have you just kind of generalize them. Now, in this setup, my eye level is right here, so that would mean that my vanishing point would be probably right around the middle of this, because I think I was looking at it right in the middle. And so that means, like, let's see, this angle is coming up through here, then maybe it was right around here. It means this angle is going to be a little bit sharper. It's going to come up and through there, and just kind of comparing what the edges of my box are. Probably going to be a little bit lower than this. Let me see, maybe kind of round in through there. Let's try that. Okay, so I've got kind of that box set up, but I also have, see, I've got a recipe box right in the front here. I'll take a closer look to that image. Really get a sense for what those spaces look like. Okay. I think I can see all the way into that corner there. It's pretty dark though. Let's see. So if I set that up there as off off of the edge of that cigar box just a little bit. So maybe I'll put that right there. So yeah, I put all of these boxes in kind of following about the same angles. So that should make them a little bit more consistent. I should be able to get a little bit more consistency with those as I go. But I am working, even though I've got my still life in front of me, I am working off of the photograph. And that is a little bit awkward for a couple of reasons. And one of them is the fact that the camera distorts the image quite a bit. So even though I was personally looking at, I think maybe the box up at the top here, the block up at the top here, which I haven't put in yet, it really distorted all of these, and so the block looks like it's over my eye, above my eye level. So I'm just going to kind of go with that, but I'm sketching things in right now. I'm not going to be super specific about proportions quite yet because I just want to make sure that I'm getting placement worked out. Now the recipe box is right about in the middle, so I can already tell I made it too wide this way, so I'm going to have to scoot this line over just a little. And I'm not drawing life size. I really like to when I can, but this drawing is, the still life is a little bit bigger than my paper, and I don't want to spend too much time working on this drawing for your sake, because I know it can be kind of boring to just watch somebody draw for 20 or 30 minutes. Now, I like it, but that's me. So I'm going through. Right now, I'm just trying to imitate the shapes that I'm seeing. And I get this question a lot from students about, like, how do I draw what I see? How do I draw these things like I see them? Because trying to figure out what you see and what's there, what you think you see and what's there, those can feel like two different things at times. So I can already tell, yeah. So I made this all a little bit larger. I don't know, I think that looks all right. So I'm gonna keep it. And ultimately with your drawings, there can be a certain amount of artistic license that you employ that nobody's gonna be seeing except for me, I guess. Nobody's gonna be seeing your photograph, your reference photo, and your drawing side by side. So, you know, I'm okay with taking a little bit of license as you go through these things. And even as I see this in my photograph, my block and my cigar box, they line up exactly. I don't really like the way when everything lines up. I used to think it was really cool. You know, I think Bob Ross would call them happy accidents. I'd think of like, oh, it's really cool. It's a happy accident. I'm like, but now I don't really care for that. I like overlaps. I like kind of adjusting space. And let me see about the difference between these two sides. Let's see, there to there. This is definitely going to be a little bit shorter than that one. You know, this is a recipe box, my grandma's old recipe box. I've done a couple other drawings and paintings with this too. I find that there's a lot of objects that I keep coming back to, that I draw over and over again. Usually it's because I already think it's pretty interesting. Okay, this is a longer block. This is an old kind of antique or vintage block. So I'm not really sure if I want to make it exactly the same proportion. I don't want it to look wrong. That's something else. Okay, so as we've got artistic license, there are going to be times that you draw something accurately, but it doesn't look right. Sometimes I have to change things so that it actually looks more accurate, looks correct. And a lot of times that'll be like something's dented or something is at a funny angle, or the way the lighting is kind of odd on it. So it won't look quite right. I've got this overlap here and I really want to show that. Now I'm going through this. Let's see. Oh my goodness, that says a 6B. I don't really want to work with a 6B. It's a little too soft. What do I have here? I do not know what this pencil is. Right at the, okay, medium. So it's probably a 2B. You can really do the whole drawing with just an HB or a B pencil. These compressed charcoal pencils will come in various hardnesses, softnesses, various degrees, varying degrees. The 6B, it should lay down a little bit darker line, but it's not quite like graphite. They're all going to be about the same in the value. It's just some of them will lay a little bit more of the charcoal down. So I've got compressed charcoal here. You could probably use compressed charcoal sticks. I like how convenient the pencils are. They make a little less of a mess too. All right, so I've got a couple of boxes. All right, go on to this cigar box. It's going to be about as tall as that box is there. And I can already tell it's up at an angle. The corner here, and that's going to come down here. And I know it's actually back, the bottom of it is back just a little ways. Let's see, and then I've got this other block. It's right here. Okay. So if I were to follow, it's about going to be about the same on both sides. Let me see. Goes like that. So if I were to follow this angle, all these angles down, it's like they would go off the page down here, but they should come out around my horizon line and through here. So these ones going up here, these ones are coming down, all these are coming up here. So this vanishing point actually might be kind of close to this side over here. This one, I think, goes off the page. And that's one of the reasons I didn't really want to get into going through the specifics of figuring out the vanishing points, because with a smaller paper, it's harder to do. You have to make the whole drawing really small in order to get the vanishing points on the paper, or you have to, stretch out your paper, you use a really large sheet of paper, or tape more pieces of paper to the back and then figure out your vanishing point that way. I didn't really want to get into all of that for such a short drawing. Like I said, this is going to be a shorter drawing. You guys are only going to have a week to work on this, which I know that there's not a lot of time when you only have a week to work on something. So I don't want you to really agonize over finding specific vanishing points. That'll be for another time. And honestly, even when I'm doing perspective or using perspective in a drawing or a painting, I'm not very often, it's rare that I am actually trying to figure out all the vanishing points. Now, there is something that I still haven't done, and that is this box has got like a thickness to it, and the sides are of a slightly different thickness of wood, plywood. So those ones are thicker. Maybe I'll come over this way. Don't want to make them too thick because it is a small drawing. But these guys are a little bit thinner, the top, or in this case, the top and the bottom. But I know what this is going to overlap just a little bit. I want to make sure that I can indicate that. So maybe I have to bring that angle down just a little bit more. You can see that I do not have a heavy hand as I'm doing this. I've got a very, very light hand. I've talked a little bit about how to hold your pencil. I don't get into it a ton about, sometimes I'll hold it like I'm writing an essay, but I don't ever rest my hand on my drawing, on my paper. When you do that, especially with charcoal, it's like you're going to get the side of your hand all black, your drawing's going to get all mushy. I know that probably happened with some of you with your graphite drawing, but one of the things that as I'm drawing, and I'm on a table, I don't have this set up in front of me. That's usually, I would probably work vertical most of the time, But for these, when I'm filming these videos, it's a little bit easier to draw on a table. But so even when I'm holding my hand, holding my pencil like this, you can't see it very easily, but I've got my pinky kind of balancing, or my fingernail balancing on stuff. So I am not going to make a mess with my drawing as I'm going through and working out some of these specifics. Okay. All right. Still staying pretty loose with stuff. Don't use a ruler to start out with. I know it'll be very tempting, especially when you've got boxes. You've got all these straight lines you want to draw. You want to use a ruler. I can understand that. I really can. But at this point in the drawing, I'm still trying to work out proportions, still trying to make sure that things are accurate. If I start in right away with a ruler, I am less likely to want to erase that line because it's so nice and straight. I want to try and work around it. And that's not the right approach at this point. Once I'm like maybe halfway through and I know that all of my proportions are set and I like everything, where everything's going, I might go through and clarify with a ruler, but I'm not even sure that I'll always do that. Okay, so this guy is not really clear yet. This is supposed to be overlapping a little bit more, so I'm going to try and move all of these lines over just a little bit so I can get that overlap I'm looking for. All right, now it pushes over just a little bit more. Every so often I'll try and erase with my opposite hand just to save time so I'm not switching back and forth with my eraser. I don't always do that though. Just get lazy. I know, and it's easier to switch back and forth with between my two hands than it is to just use the opposite hand. All right, let's see. Okay, I'm feeling better about this. Okay. I think this would be interesting. Maybe I'll try and take this into Photoshop and see how I adjust the lines, if I can find where my vanishing points are. We'll see. We'll see if that pops up in this video. Just a side image. See how close I got. Okay, I've got that and that and that. This is a little bit closer, so I'm going to bring this in. So now that I'm starting to work in with charcoal and some more values, there are often, there I am, switching back and forth. Sometimes I'll draw all my contours in and start to fill in the value, but sometimes I'll just create a value as I go. You know, it doesn't always work out. It doesn't always work out that way, but a lot of times it does. Okay, let's make sure I've got this. Stretch this out just a little bit. Now, maybe less so when I'm working with a still life. I like things to be nice and straight and whatever. But when I'm, say, working with a figure drawing, you know, maybe I just want to start shading right at the beginning, because those shapes are really nice to lay in, you know, different shadow shapes on a figure. It's really nice to just lay those in right at the beginning. So I am probably going to start just filling in value in just a minute here. Okay, so this back section in through here, all of this is pretty dark, but I don't want to like scrub into that with really dark value. And I should also mention that I'm going to be shading everything through this. So probably going to go through a couple of sections, break this up, or segments, break this up. Got a lot of details that I would like to put in, but I'm not quite as concerned about right now. And I think that's a question I get pretty often, especially when it comes to labels and details, like how much information should I put in? So in this case, like there's a 5 in here. I'm gonna try and lay that in really generally. But it's so easy to make everything way too big or too small for that matter, now that I think about it. So I'm just gonna be really general when I put these in, and I've got this O on this side here. These are different colors, but they're also one's in the light and one's in the shadow. So I'm going to try and be careful about making this a bit lighter in value once I get there. This says Napoleon. All right, how do I do that? I've got a section back down here, and I have a feeling that maybe I didn't make this quite long enough to start out with, but maybe I can stretch that out just a hair, just a little bit. All right, so I'm going to try and attempt this. Let's see if I can write in Napoleon. Okay. All right. That is kind of embarrassing, but it's not that bad. It's not really that bad. Let's see. All right, well, I'll start with that. We'll see how it goes from there. This is also going to be a little bit angled. And there's kind of a box design. There is also a label there. And this has got a bunch of like kind of stamps and labels and running through there. I'm not gonna worry about that quite yet. This has got a little wolf on it, kind of running. Let's see. Do I try that now? Maybe. Let's see. I'm gonna try and draw like really general silhouette kind of. Got this tail sticking out there. I can see the head, but I'm not gonna be specific about it. It's at an angle, so that means that things are gonna be distorted, you know, from the get-go. So I'm gonna leave it there. I know that's not really, looks like just a blob. Let's see. Put in my N here. Again, I know that's not going to take up quite as much space. It's going to be smaller. It's even going to be smaller than I made it so far. Let's try this again. All right. All right, that's better. Not tons better, but it's better. And this actually has a duck over here. I don't know that I really want to draw the duck. We'll figure that one out. Do something else. Okay, so let's see. Oh, I've got a bunch of cast shadows. Let's see. Some of these I'm going to put in, some of these I'm not. I've got a couple of different light sources, so that makes things a little bit tricky. As I'm working through with the perspective and getting these angles, sometimes the cast shadows, they look like they're going to a vanishing point as well. Probably are not. Probably not going to a vanishing point. Most of the time, these will all go to the same point, but not always. So I can't always tell you exactly what's going to go to the vanishing point, but usually if there are objects that are on the same plane that are kind of arranged in a similar way with similar angles, those will usually go to the vanishing point. Now, if I had like an octagon shaped box or something like that, then probably some of those angles aren't going to be going to the vanishing point. All right, now I'm going to switch back to my my soft pencil. I didn't even get into making a value scale with this. I know for the next project after this, we'll be working on toned paper and creating value scale. But let's see. I'll make a value scale on this paper because this is what we're working on right now. Okay, here I'm going to start with a value scale. I'm going to do this a couple of different ways because a lot of times students will want to blend, use like a drawing stump or Q-tip or something like that. Just make a couple of boxes. I'm not going to get super specific about this. But generally you want to think about like the white of the paper. If I was to make a hole here, a circle, like this is the white of the paper. And then back down here, this is going to be really similar to graphite, what our approach was for this as well. So I use the absolute black of the paper very rarely, the absolute white of the paper very rarely. Everything is going to be some amount of values in between. And actually I'm going to make another series of boxes because I'll try and treat one with just using the white of the paper. I'm not going to use any blending tools. Then another one I'm going to try and use some blending tools and see what it gets me. But again, the same idea. I'm not using the white of the paper very often. I'm not using the absolute black of the paper very often, but mostly it's going to be some amount of values in between. So it's really helpful to get a good sense of how this is all going to play out on your drawing paper. So that's why it's like using the drawing paper, having your value scale at the same time. Maybe actually I should do this at the same time. And I have a feeling I'm going to have to sharpen my pencil as I go. Like right now I'm just using kind of the side of the pencil, and as you see it picks up the tooth of the paper a lot. So it can make a more fuzzy looking drawing. All right. You know, the more of the tip of the pencil you get or you use, the more streaky it's going to look, but it's also going to get down into the crevices, those valleys of the tooth of the paper. Like a really soft pencil is going to pick up the high points really easily. So I'm gonna switch over to maybe my harder pencil in just a second. I'm gonna go back into this just more with the tip of the pencil. If you want to get really into this, you can fill in all those little holes. I'd probably have to sharpen it before I did that, but I want to just get an idea of what this value range is going to look like. Everything should be shaded at least a little bit. I saw a couple of drawings with the graphite, the rendered shading drawing that like only the objects were shaded and everything else was left white. Well, that's not really how this is supposed to work. The white is the highlights. If you leave other things, the shade of the paper, the white of the paper, it's gonna make your highlights not count for anything. So yeah, you really have to shade everything. And yes, that takes a bit longer. I get it. That's why I try and leave you guys enough time to work on your contour drawing, get all your perspective and proportions and design all figured out, and then you can spend the rest of the time working on the shading and developing form and volume. All right. So this is a weak value range, but it's something. It's a start. All right. So, before I really move on and do more shading, whatever, just kind of show you right here. I've got an X-Acto knife, utility knife, and I'm just going to shave off the outside edge, kind of like you're whittling a stick. My kids love whittling and making spears. Make a lot of spears. You know, the softer your pencil, the more chance it has to break off when you get to this point. Harder pencils will inevitably be a little bit harder to break off, and then I kind of start shaving it. Some people have sandpaper to help get to this point, make a nice sharp point. Pretty good point. All right, good enough. So let's see, I'll go over this a little bit more. Now, let's see. So this top one, I'm not going to do any blending. So if I really want to get into the tooth of the paper, I have to draw up kind of vertically, or get that pencil really perpendicular to the paper. So I can't use the side of my pencil anymore. So what we're going to have is like an example of optical blending. So this whole side, you know, how much of the paper shows through is going to affect the value range. So in these cases where I don't have nearly as much of the tone of the paper showing through, it's going to be quite a bit darker. You know, this is absolute, nothing showing through. And then, you know, various amounts through here. Now there's also a certain amount of pressure, so it's not like it's all exactly the same pressure. You can see that this is showing up lighter over here than this is, because I'm not using quite as much pressure. You don't want this to be streaky. When you get around to blending, if you decide to use blending, using a blending tool is not just like a magic wand to make everything all pull together. If you start with a streaky surface and you use a blending tool, you will maintain that streaky surface. You really have to make sure that you're going a bunch of different directions before you jump in with the blending tool. And it's also not a last step either. Oh, I'm going to show you. It's like I'm going to accidentally go too dark on this side. But what happens if you go too dark? Well, use your kneaded eraser. I did not warm this up, so it's going to take me just a minute to start to pull this apart. Ugh, gross. Got a hair stuck in it. You drop erasers and ugh. Okay, so I've got my kneaded eraser warmed up a little bit. I'm going to flatten one side of it, kind of like that. And then I'm going to use it like a stamp here. I'm going to press down, and that pulls off some of the value without mushing it around. So if I tried to do that over here, no, actually that's kind of effective, but it's starting to make it kind of blend a little bit and fuzz out. In this case, I don't really care because I am gonna blend this whole section, but let's move into, let's see. All right, so you can use a blending tool like this. I also use Q-tips, which apparently don't have right now, but I'm just gonna go through and I'll show you kind of how this looks. And I do it just the same as I would a pencil. Holding it about the same. It is going to take a little bit of the pigment off, so I have to make sure that take care of that before too long. Let's see. Trying to use a light pressure, but you can see how much darker this is going to make it because it's covering up all those holes, even just a little bit. You know, the value is not all the same. It's not like we're painting this, so there is still some variation there. So if you want to blend, A, don't use your fingers, and B, make sure that you realize that all your values will end up being just a little bit darker. So I'm going a couple of different directions here. I guess I could probably try and work on the side just a little bit more. It still looks really splotchy to me, so maybe I'm gonna try and pull some of this off just to even it up. And this is where it can start to get kind of tedious. Most of the time, I would just rather go through and use my pencil as opposed to have to come back into kind of fixing things with a kneaded eraser. On some level, you can draw, you can shade with the blending tool, but it tends to be really inconsistent. And so I am a little bit of a control freak, and so like to have more control over the surface and my tools that I'm using. So now these are just spots. Like I should probably try and do some sort of gradation with like a smooth surface, but we'll come back to that in a little bit. To the drawing, let's see. Going to go in with my cast shadows back here, start to lay in a value, and I know it's going to be pretty dark. But I'm not going to go super dark right away. I'm just going to be laying in a value. Try not to lose my edges too much. Actually, this should probably be a little bit clearer, a little bit better identified. When you're shading with value like this, when you're shading with charcoal especially, there's almost like a painterly quality that the drawing takes on. And so there's going to be a real process of losing and finding your drawing. So I don't leave a halo around objects, but I will shade right up to the edge because I want to maintain those edges and clarify those later on though. Like this whole background is pretty dark, so I want to start out with it being a little bit darker anyway. Kind of filling in some larger shapes. You know, even though these are my objects, like this whole space is my still life. So I'm going to want to fill that in as well too before too long. Now I'm always really tentative when it comes to shading with value. If it's paint, I'll lay the paint right down there, but Always takes me a little bit longer to actually build up surface and value, but I know I've got some shadows kind of coming around and through here. I definitely need to lay in some value there. So I'm gonna go all the way up there. You don't want to leave the background to the end because I've noticed that students will have a tendency to be really focused on the objects, be really detailed with that, and then all of a sudden they have to rush at the end, and the background ends up looking really streaky or messy, and it really just ends up taking away from the great work that they did on all the other stuff. So this is at least a quarter of the whole image, so I need to make sure that I'm spending some time working on the background as well. Right now it's going to be kind of scribbly, just kind of laying in some value. My lightest values are going to be probably on some of these boxes, right up around and through here. It means everything else needs to come down from that. So let's see. Yeah, I'm gonna keep going just a little bit longer with this. Bring in that edge. I don't necessarily want to make this corner like a real dark line. I want that to be kind of values up against values. So maybe make this side a little bit darker here. Come back to it if I feel like I need to. But even though I've got a cast shadow all in through here, like I know I have to shade all that stuff in the background. So I'm gonna go right into that right now. I switched over to my 2B or B pencil, whichever this is. Definitely a harder pencil. Shade right up to that edge there. Now, even though I'm going all horizontal through this area, I don't really want to see a direction in my pencil mark, so I'm going to have to come back to that. Kind of fill in some of those spaces, do a little bit more overlap. I'm more rushing through this just for the sake of time. Not real good with video editing yet, so at some point I'll be able to speed this up. All right, so just about everything's covered. Now it's just a matter of, let's see, I think I'm going to let's see, I'm going to wait on really clarifying some of these forms until I take it into Photoshop and just see what I need to kind of correct, edit. But you can see it's like I've got everything covered. I've got edges kind of addressed. And as I say that, I just kind of messed up that one right there. Now I'm going to work through surfaces, kind of even these things out. I might actually go through and use the drawing stump and kind of blend a little bit more than usual, just so that you guys can see really what the effect of that does. Got some cast shadows in here that I still need to kind of work out. But I'll get to that in a little bit. I've got a little bit of a reflection in through here. Oh, I never put that edge of the box in. Let's see how that opens there. And then the back section, it's got kind of a hinge. So the hinge is a little bit lower than those sides. We'll see how that, oh, okay, yeah. There's a little bump there. I'm not gonna worry about that right now. But so that is started. And I guess I'm gonna keep going and try and update you guys with my progress.